Welcome everyone to today's exciting ILTA podcast interview entitled How Advances in Artificial Intelligence Are Changing the Face of Search. I'm your moderator today, Jennifer Mendez. I'm the Senior Director of Knowledge Management Innovation at Fisher Phillips. And I'm so excited to be joined by Pablo Arredondo, co-founder and Chief Innovation Officer at Casetext. Welcome, Pablo.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Do you want to do a brief introduction to our listeners?
Sure. My name is Pablo Arredondo. As you mentioned, I'm a co-founder at Casetext. I was a patent litigator at Kirkland and Ellis in San Francisco, and then Quinn Emanuel in New York for a while. But for the last 14 years, I've been putting my shoulder towards trying to build better technology for attorneys.
Awesome. So when we put this session together a few months ago, the news was not yet public about all of the wonderful things that Casetext is doing. And so now with that information in hand, we're going to allow that information to sort of guide this conversation a little bit. So I'm going to dive into the questions, obviously knowing that the introduction of co-counsel and ChatGPT have changed the industry. So we often hear about various search options in legal technology, right? We talk about enterprise search and predictive search and conceptual search, just to name a few. How has search evolved in the legal industry over the last decade? But then I'm going to pivot and also ask just in the last year.
Right, absolutely. So, I think that the majority of the first half of the last decade, search has more or less been sort of in a morass. It was sort of stuck in the same place. I theatrically call it the keyword prison, which just means simply that you're at the mercy of guessing the right word. And that would mean that you'd miss things that you want, or you'd bring back a bunch of things that you didn't want that just happen to have the word. Very kind of long-standing, deep, fundamental problem with search. And what started to happen with the advent of these large language models, long before GPT, there was this one called BERT. You started to be able to encode language in a richer way. And that led to the ability to search without being at the mercy of your keyword. At Casetext, we released something called parallel search for case law, and then expanded it into all search to let you do that search on other things like transcripts and litigation records and things like that. And so for the first time, you could search for the complete sentence. You could take a sentence directly from your draft brief or the partner's email and use that as the query. And then on top of that, it was using a much richer encoding of language. And so it would find you relevant things, even if there was no overlap in the words at all. And that was pretty cool. At least I used to think that was pretty cool until, my definition of very cool when it comes to legal tech kind of shifted a lot. And that's because, about 6 months ago, we started working with OpenAI and looking at GPT-4 and bringing it to law. And Jake and I, when we saw just how powerful this new model was, we realized that what we call search currently might be unrecognizable to sort of where we end up. For starters, I think one of the big differences is having the AI be able now to create the search queries for you, run the searches for you, and then critically handle all of those bad results for you. It will say, oh no, that one's not relevant, this one is. That's something that takes a lot of human effort and time. And then on top of it, the AI is now able to synthesize from all of the results it reads a sort of memo-like answer, right? With here's what I think the answer is, here are the cases you should read, and then critically, here's why you should read it. So we're now much closer to something like a memo than a traditional search. So all that's to say, there's been a huge amount of evolution in what search is, and all of it is being driven by these breakthroughs, these things called transformer-based neural nets and the large language models that they enable.
So obviously, we've been talking a lot about large language models, and we know that GPT-4 was released just yesterday, and Casetext also announced yesterday that co-counsel passed the bar, which is incredible. Obviously, that's just one aspect of how artificial intelligence can really change the way that we conduct search. How do you think additional advances in artificial intelligence are going to change the way that we search, both in law firms and in legal departments?
Absolutely. So, to take another great area of search in law is e-discovery. and e-discovery is a very expensive process. Now it's early days, but we're starting to see that tools like GPT-4 can have superior recall, as in finding more of the relevant documents, even than a team of humans working together. Now, again, it's the best outcome would probably be having both going, right? But we're seeing a fantastic ability now to automate a lot of the really critical aspects of finding the most relevant documents, including the ability to type in things like, find me something where somebody's concealing something from their boss, just like an incredibly nuanced input, and it's able to understand it and interpret it, and then faithfully go find things for that. So I think doc review, which is sort of a mix of brute force reading and search, I think is going to be completely transformed. And then on the transactional side, an area, I was a patent litigator, so I know a little bit less about this, just to put it mildly. But one thing we're hearing from firms a lot is they'll have a database of all their merger agreements, and often they want to go back and see, how did we do thing in this a similar deal, right? A Brazilian sports company was, so whatever the dimensions are, and but their agreements aren't very well annotated, right? They either they didn't hire a bunch of humans to go do it, or the associates who were tasked with it thought it was voluntary, right? There's all these different ways. Well, now the power of GPT-4 is such that we can likely annotate all of those agreements and then fold all of that into a search engine. And I think that's something we're working on right now, and I think will be another kind of just complete a search that didn't really exist before, or exist in a very crude way, should now feel really intuitive.
So that's actually great, because we're talking about use cases in different ways that artificial intelligence can help you find and leverage the data within your firm. What do you think the future of search looks like beyond GPT-4?
Wow. Well, I mean, first of all, things are moving so fast that I hazard to even make any predictions. But I know right now, just as the current setup is, it's kind of reactive. You tell it you want something and it goes to get you, right? But I can certainly see GPT-4 powering systems where it's reading the docket and it's aware, hey, you need to see this, right? We actually started doing stuff like that with Casetext a while back, even with Kara, right? The idea of sort of having things monitor. But that kind of structure is often limited by how good the natural language processing is, right? Can you really determine what event is actually happening on the docket? It's harder than you might think. And so I think that this kind of language model is going to enable a new form of like monitoring calendars, correspondence, pleadings, and then automatically kind of creating summaries, calendaring opposition deadlines, refuting case law, whatever it is that it may be. I think. So I think search will feel, sometimes you won't be searching, you'll just be receiving, right? Which is never bad. That's not the end of the world, right?
So my son relies on Alexa a lot to answer questions, some that I just don't want to answer for him. And one of the questions that I get all the time being in this space is, will we see Siri or Alexa for legal? And obviously the technology is there. We've talked about this. Do you think that is a realistic option for the future, especially considering maybe smaller firms or solo practitioners who can't hire an associate would have sort of co-counsel in their office, serving as their law clerk or summer associate? Do you think that that's realistic? And if so, what do you think are the ethical implications of having a voice-enabled technology serve as a resource?
Yeah, so I mean, there's two aspects of the story. There's the voice activated aspect, and then there's just the kind of having a digital assistant that helps you with stuff, right? And I definitely think we're going to have a legal version of a digital assistant that helps you with everything. And in fact, co-counsel is sort of wants to head in that direction, and I'm sure there'll be others that want to as well. Because it's such a profoundly useful thing to have, right? A system that can interact with all the different elements that you have to interact with. So I do think you're going to see that. You mentioned, attorneys that don't have any associates, so then they're going to get it. Our view is that this shouldn't replace lawyers, right? So what it should do is magnify the ability of a lawyer to put out really high quality work product, right? To just be the best attorney they can be. So if you don't have anybody, yes, it would be great to have co-counsel, no doubt about it. Even if you have someone, the idea is co-counsel can help them kind of do what they're doing. And you don't want to let someone go just so you can go get co-counsel. I think right now, I don't think that's the right exchange.
Agreed.
And so then the ethical implications of that, right? There are so many different ethical and professional responsibility dimensions to this. And, as somebody, obviously, like you could say he's biased, he wants to, he's in the business of selling this stuff. So, some of the things I think are very much pushing its adoption, right? Like when you can see that it finds better recall, it finds more relevant documents, you're talking about nothing less than an increase in the standard of care, right? I mean, that's a pretty substantive reason to move with some efficiency. But that said, this is also a black box, the neural nets, and there's other aspects of it where, have courts ever ruled on this stuff? There's other aspects of it where I think, it's understandably firms are wanting to like move carefully. We're all for moving carefully. I think that is the correct way to move when you have GPT-4. So, I think that, I don't have the every ethics answer, but far from it, I think it's great that these conversations are starting. So let me duck it that way.
That's actually a perfect segue, because the legal industry is sort of notorious for its unhurried approach to change. How do you see sort of the change management and the adoption process of technologies like co-counsel or just GPT-4 in general sort of playing out in legal? And what outside factors do you think will drive law firm adoption, especially as we see all of this play out in the media?
Yeah. So lawyers and their deliberately slow adoption of technology. Like a lot of cultural things, sometimes it starts at the top. Chief Justice Roberts penned an essay, and some of the listeners here may have heard me go on this, forgive me, but he wrote an essay in 2016, I think, saying, what's great is that we have the tortoise and the hare engraved on the Supreme Court building. And he was pointing to it saying, when it comes to tech, the tortoise, aren't we just so great? And, my issue with that is that, the tortoise wins the race. And we're not exactly winning the race, I think, for providing every citizen with access to good, affordable, efficient justice. I think we'd all agree that we can be a lot better there. And so I don't think citing to the victorious tortoise, actually, I don't, I respectfully think that that's not thinking this through, and that we need something in between. Obviously, you can't be reckless, you can't be irresponsible. There are immense stakes with law. But, I think this new technology is so palpably useful for things that I would hope that attorneys would move quickly, thinking not, how does this disrupt my relationship with my client, but instead, how does this help me be a better lawyer to my client, which after all is supposed to be the mandate.
Absolutely. That's our hope. Obviously, being in this space, that legal technology will help our attorneys do their jobs better and to help them be more efficient. So thank you so much, Pablo, for your time and effort today, especially given all of your travel woes.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Audience will greatly enjoy this interview. Any questions, feel free to contact Pablo or myself via LinkedIn, and we hope you have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks so much.